Hello and welcome to Gladys Cake Kitchen. My name is Gladys, baker and cake artist, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. Occasionally, I also do sit-down videos handing you simple, helpful, practical tips to help you navigate cake decorating and to level up your baking and decorating skills. So if it's your first time here, hello and welcome here. I hope at the end of this video you find some value, and if you do, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share this video, like, so that YouTube is able to recommend this video to some more people who may find it useful. Today we're going to be making a very simple cake. We're going through the basics of cake making, and normally on this channel there are a lot of video tutorials to teach you this, but hopefully in this live demonstration I'll talk you through some tools, the basics of making a cake, so that you will have further value for your baking and decorating. It is my hope that at the end of this video, if you take nothing away from this video at all, you're able to understand the tools that will help you decorate a cake with all confidence, plus the basic skills you need to decorate a cake. I'll also encourage you to check on the channel at the end of this video to see if I will also encourage you to check on the channel at the end of this video to see a few more videos that are created into tutorials to help inform you and help you level up your baking and decorating skills. Today I am making a simple chocolate cake, which hopefully, I don't know how long this session is going to run. I am a one-person production, so I am counting on lights and other items, but if we have enough time, we should be able to decorate a full cake and also be able to crumb coat a second cake. Now, the first cake is my son's birthday, and I'm one of those parents who makes cakes all year through. It's actually my business. But I wasn't feeling so motivated to make this cake. But my son likes chocolate cake, so my hope was to just find a way to make him a chocolate cake whilst also bringing you some value. So today we're going to be making a simple chocolate cake, hopefully a drip cake, and also make a second cake, a 6-inch cake that is going to be crumb coated. Depending on how this live goes tomorrow, I'll be able to finish off that cake. So you have two parts to this live. Having said that, I will start this by talking to you through some of the tools I have on my table here. Normally, I would have a range of tools to work through, but to kind of not overwhelm you and to keep this live very simple and set on the subject on which we are working, I'm going to talk you through the tools that I have here. I'll talk you through why I use them, how you can replicate those, and have some understanding of what you need to decorate a basic cake. So the cake we are going to be making, like I said, is a 6-inch and an 8-inch. So for the 6-inch, we'll have a cake drum and an 8-inch cake board. You can call this a drum or a board, and both drum, board, either way, different countries, different terminologies. You can replace the cake drum and board with cake circles. For these, I normally would use them as the base of the cake. You will see how that comes into play. But before that, we have a turntable. This is my professional turntable I picked up for, I think, $29.99 somewhere on Amazon. Before I picked this, for nearly 5 years plus or 6, I had a simple $9.99 plastic turntable that helped me make my cakes even on a professional level. So you don't necessarily need an advanced tool to help you, but it's efficient and it is super helpful. The purpose of the turntable is to help easily turn around and assist when you're decorating the cake. With this demonstration, as we go on, you will get to see how useful this particular turntable is. It is very efficient and it helps in the decorating process. For me, on top of that, you will need a non-grip mat, and a non-slip or a grip mat. This is slightly worn out, so in place of a grip mat, you can use a sellotape, which you will stick to the middle here, and then on top of that, your cake board goes. Because I have the non-slip or grip mat that goes on top of the turntable, and on top of that I have another cake board. For me, this cake board is the basis of my working surface. The cake board here serves to be my working surface from which the cake will be decorated, because on here I like to transfer my cakes after I have worked on them. throughout the process, you will get to see how all of these come together. Between that, if I was decorating a 6-inch cake, which I will be doing today, we'll have a 6-inch cake board to go on top of my work surface, or an 8-inch cake board to go on my work surface. So for us to be prepared for what we're going to be doing first, I am going to stick some ganache on the cake surface so that that sets, and you will see why that is important. And for that, I am going to place the 8-inch cake board, because we are going to be making the 8-inch cake. Actually, no, for convenience, we're probably going to do the 6-inch first, because we're going to crumb coat that. I will talk you through how that will work. So I'm going to move this over there, and I'll replace that with a 10-inch cake board. So you can have a sizable cake board that fills your work surface. So because we're going to be making the 6-inch cake first, I have a 10-inch cake board. It doesn't matter the cake surface, what size you're using. But over that, I have a small bit of ganache, and there is a 6-inch board over there. I have just gone ahead to do this just so that these are able to set for when we are making the cakes. But I'm going to be talking you through a few of the tools as well. As you saw, I had an offset spatula to spread the ganache on there. An offset spatula is a small tool that helps you spread ganache buttercream easily on the cake. It's important what the size of offset spatula you use. For me, this is normally used in spreading buttercream in the middle of the cake. It is small, it gives you a good grip, and you have control of the spreading motion when you're going through it. But besides that is a range of tools over here, different sizes of offset spatulas. I could talk you through all of these today, but like I said, the goal is not to overwhelm you with too much information. So I'm going to stick with what we are doing today. So for that reason, I am going to be using this offset spatula. That comes in a size of 3. There's almost like a small, medium, and a tall. So short, shorter, shorter. So however else you put it. So for that, I prefer the medium-sized one, which will give me some control over the spreading motion for that. With that said, my tools, if you will notice through the process, do actually I save them in warm water. On my side here, you won't see, but there is warm water on a stove here, and you will see how that comes useful. There are small tips and tricks that gets missed when I am decorating a cake in an edited tutorial. So my hope here is to bring you behind the scenes with me, so you have a truer understanding of what my cake decorating process is like. With that said, the next thing you perhaps need is a kind of spatula as well. Spatula, I have a plastic one here that came with my mixer. But besides that is this spatula that is in my ganache. You need that for stirring into your buttercream. And it comes with a flat surface here that makes it efficient for digging into the buttercream as well. Besides that, you have obviously your cake and various buttercreams to use. Now, to talk through the buttercream and cake we will be working with today, I have 2 8-inch cakes that haven't been leveled, as in they have been baked this way, 2 regular ones. I haven't leveled them for good reason. My son doesn't like buttercream a lot. So the intention of making a cake, there's a lot of thinking that goes into it before you come to making a cake. For instance, for some edited tutorials, you'll find the cake are leveled and torted. Torting is the art of cutting or slicing the cake into equal parts into which buttercream is then filled and the cakes stacked together. For me though, depending on what the preferences and interest of the client booking the cake, you get to think through the cake even before it is made. So for instance, the intention behind having the cakes without having to level or toast them or slice them in between to fill them with buttercream, simply because my son doesn't like buttercream a lot. So cutting into this, creating 4 different cakes and then filling all those, you'll have 3 layers of buttercream to fill in. That will become too much buttercream for a person who doesn't like buttercream. On top of that, this cake is going to be a semi-rustic, semi-naked cake, still covered with some chocolate buttercream. That will be too overwhelming for the individual, especially if they do not like buttercream. He doesn't want the cake rustic, preferably my choice, because I want to be able to apply minimal decorations to it. However, I also do not want to overwhelm the cake. So for that reason, I have chosen from the start not to toast the cake and not to create layers into which buttercream will be filled. So there will only be a single layer of buttercream in here to hold the cake, and then the cake will be covered with some more buttercream, creating a rustic look. And then hopefully we can have some chocolate drip over the cake, and then we can pipe some small basic details on there. That said, the next cake is slightly different. We have a 6-inch banana cake here that is going to be filled and covered. This is going to be a fully decorated ganache polished cake with some stencil detail and some floral finishes. We will not be finishing this cake completely today. Tomorrow you'll get to see how this cake comes together. My hope is that in this live demonstration we will be able to complete a crumb coat for this cake, leave it to set, and then we'll come back tomorrow and finish it off. Having said that, I'll talk you through the buttercream I have here. I have a chocolate Swiss meringue buttercream that I made earlier. Actually, it's a chocolate French meringue buttercream. So the French meringue, French buttercream. The French buttercream is made from whole eggs. This a ratio of egg yolks and whole eggs, however else. I have some recipes for that specifically, which I will link in the description box or at the end of this session. So you have some more information on how to make that. So that's chocolate French buttercream. And this is brown sugar Swiss meringue buttercream. So essentially, this is your regular Swiss meringue buttercream, but in place of using granulated sugar, which would have given me a whiter buttercream, I used brown sugar instead. Now, brown sugar, the reason why I used this was because I wanted to bring some intense caramel sort of flavor to balance to complement the banana cake. So there's a lot of thought that goes into making cakes and flavor combinations. So if you don't like cakes, cakes are not just limited to vanilla and American buttercream. There are so many things you can do with cakes. And for this, I specifically created this banana cake because the client I'm making this banana for is a family friend. They enjoy bananas. And I thought I can bring that to the cake. However, I also wanted something that will complement the banana cake very well, but they have a peanut allergy. So I thought I couldn't create a peanut-based buttercream. So the next thing to bring it more flavor and to complement the banana was to create the brown sugar French buttercream. So we have both buttercreams and the cakes. We've talked through a few of the tools. Some of the tools here that would become handy are scrapers. You will find that a scraper is the tool that helps you clean any excess buttercream or ganache on the cake, depending on what you are aiming to finish. There are different types of scraping tools. There are the jagged edges and different sorts of ones, but I'm sticking simply to plain straight-edged scrapers. These are stainless steel ones, and again, because much of my cakes, the second one would have a ganache finish, the 6-inch. I'm going to dip these in warm water just to keep them warmed up for when I come to using them. With that said, because we left this to set first, I am just going to go ahead and our decorating process starts now. But before we go ahead, one thing I didn't mention was also how we fill the buttercream into the cake. I have a scoop here. If you've watched a few of my tutorials, you'll find I'm no fond of the scoop. I've used it just so that I can bring you some value and teach you best practice to decorating a cake. But without a scoop, I can eyeball my buttercream. So at some point, if I lose my thought and then go back to my habits of doing things the way I understand them, please forgive me. But the use of a scoop is to allow you to be able to scoop even amounts of buttercream into the cake. This will help with keeping the cakes level, and it will help with building up the cake, because you want to make sure that everything you're doing is even, level and steady as you work. So that's a simple ice cream scoop. In place of an ice cream scoop, you can use a piping bag into which you have a piping nozzle. This is a star tip, but to get better results, you can replace the nozzle with a round tip and then put some buttercream in the piping bag. Pipe it onto the cake and then level it with your spatula. But I am keeping things really simple by using a scoop for that today. So we are going to fill our banana cake, and the filling, and I have already leveled the cakes, by the way. So I'm just going to fill that, leave it to set, and then we'll start with the chocolate cake and then we'll go back to the banana cake. So we're going to be alternating 2 cakes at the moment. So hopefully we should be able to get through, and you will learn how the process of transitioning from one cake to another becomes very efficient. With that said, that's our banana cake that I have already gone ahead and leveled. And like I said, I leveled these cakes because that is the preference for the customer, who happens to be a family friend. So I have some banana cakes that are baked and set here. To start with, I am going to spread a small bit of ganache on here. And if you just wonder why I am having ganache on here, I like working with ganache because compared to buttercream, ganache is more stable and steady. And to have that as glue on the baseboard helps to set the cake firm. So that's my first cake set on there. Now, what I did earlier was to leave the board to set on the cake board, leave that to set so that when I come to working with it, we don't have the baseboard shifting on the work surface. And that is why I did that first. Having done that, my environment is quite warm today because of the weather. So I will have to take that into account when I'm filling the cake. Okay, that's noted. Remember what I said about having the right tool. So this spatula spreads the cake evenly on here. You hold that at an angle and make sure that your arm is close to you, and you turn this. The intention is, no matter how much you've put on the cake, the intention is to spread the buttercream evenly by keeping the spatula steady at an angle and then turning the cake board, as you can see here. With that done and no pressure, you realize that there's not much buttercream I have taken off, but I have managed to spread the buttercream evenly on the cake. Also, at these stages, a few things you can think about when you're filling a cake is the preferences of the customer, how much buttercream they like. Sometimes the amount of buttercream in a cake can be overwhelming to the cake itself. In the past, I have made the mistake of overfilling the cake with buttercream, and that in itself has not just caused problem for the taste, but if you overfill the buttercream, that can create problems with the structure of the cake, and you'll see why in a minute. So I have the next cake that I have to put on here. That is placed on, and I have to look down to make sure that it is level over the first layer of cake over there. And if I were to put more buttercream on here, it will mean that this cake is hanging on top of the buttercream. With the weather being hot that is likely to create some sliding issues on my work table. But beyond that, it is likely to create bulges for your end product. I'm sure you've seen a few cakes where you fill a cake up and then by the end of it, the cake has tipped off or fallen off. These may be reasons. So building a cake, you almost have to think through that process. But then again, I'm just filling this cake with buttercream. Buttercream is not the only filling that you can have for a cake. You can have soft fillings like caramel, jam, and other fillings that will go inside the cake. Because I'm not doing that today, I'm not going to overwhelm you with information on that. Hopefully in my next live sessions, I'll be able to bring you some value and some more information about filling a cake. So my next will be the second layer here. And then, like we did before, the idea is to spread the buttercream wide, then clean the rest off. And that's it. So the buttercream that is edging out from the side, you can clean that with your spatula. Now, let's talk about the cake layers themselves. Sometimes for the purposes of convenience, you want to have larger cake slices, cake layers, and sometimes you can have your layers thinner. It all depends on how or what your goal is. For this cake, it is going to travel about 30 minutes away from me. That's not a long drive in terms of cake, but it's important that the cake remains steady. So the larger the layers are, the more solid you feel the cake will be. And if you look at the layers and the ratio of buttercream, the idea is to keep the buttercream minimal, not just that, not so I can minimize structural issues that may come with the buttercream, but also the client specifically does not like a lot of buttercream. So they told me from the get-go that they did not appreciate too much buttercream. That will be overwhelming. So with that in mind, I'm just making sure that there is just enough buttercream to complement the cake, but to not overwhelm the cake. Like I said, it's a bit hot out here today. It's just like a little bit warm. So I am just going to work through this rather quickly, just so that we don't have a cake that has melted on us. So that's the third layer. And then we have that on there. Now at this stage, if it were, right, so right. Okay, so our cake is right. I'm just gonna clean my worktop on here. It's important to keep your work surface tidy as you work, because for me, keeping the workspace tidy also helps to keep me mentally stable and clear for what I'm doing, because once the work surface gets a bit messy, everything becomes overwhelming. So over here, we can see that the cake is almost layered and filled. We are done now. At this stage, you can get on eye level, but I think from the angle of looking at this cake, you can see it a bit more rounded. We don't want a rounded cake, but for what it is worth, we need to leave this cake to set completely so that even if we have to trim and then cover the cake, we don't have a cake that is shifting and sliding. So our first job is done now. I'm gonna leave that to set in the refrigerator and I'll be back to start on the 8-inch cake. We're going to be filling is the 8-inch chocolate cake, the cake that my son's birthday cake. So the cakes were baked and wrapped in a cling film, turned upside down. Because I didn't want to level them, I still needed them to be flat topped for when I came to using them. So you have a decadent chocolate cake here. And I have another chocolate cake here. So our cake is unwrapped. And I'm gonna right. So we're starting on our 8-inch chocolate cake. For the chocolate cake, again, we're using the same process and method. So I'm spreading some ganache here. And I am going to stick the first cake on here. There are slight burns on the cake, but that is okay. The cake is going to be right. For this, I am probably going to skip the scoop and show you what my eyeballing method looks like. So I've just put enough buttercream on here that I know can spread over the surface. Now I have the larger spatula that is, so what I'm doing is the spatula is obviously held at an angle. My arm is just beside me, and this is what you do. So what you're doing is you're turning the turntable and keeping this at an angle, and there you have it. Easy peasy. That aside, I'm just going to, ooh, okay. This cake, if I'm not careful, it's likely to spill over. So I'm trying not to eat the cake pieces, but hey, there you have it. So because this cake is going to be a rustic cake, I almost feel like I want to crumb coat and cover it now. So I'm going to go ahead and give it the first coat. The crumb coating phase is just putting a layer of buttercream or ganache to seal in cake crumbs. For instance, if I had leveled this cake or had to trim off the burns on the side of this cake, that would have created more crumbs. But as you can see, there are still crumbs on the cake, if you like. So I am just going to go ahead and cover it with a layer of buttercream just to seal it off. And because this is going to be sort of a rustic looking cake, it will have an unpolished finish to it. The idea is to keep it rather simple. It's for a 6-year-old who just likes a good chocolate cake. So there's not much I am doing with this cake, but the base board, which is this board, for some cake decorators, you will find that they don't use the baseboard. It is neither a good nor bad thing, and it is neither here nor there. There are different ways to skin a cat, and so it is in cake decorating that there are so many ways to achieve the same results. For me, it's a case of preference. I tend to want convenience and ease. Transferring the cake when there is no baseboard underneath can be a bit tricky. I just want to avoid the whole drama of that. And this is a dough cutter that I am using to scrape the cake. I bought this many years ago when I started cake decorating. I didn't have the understanding of the tools that I needed. So on recommendation, I think, I picked this one up. Over the years, I have used a hardware scraping tool from B&Q to my stainless steel scraper that I used earlier. So just having an understanding of the tools you need doesn't necessarily have to be expensive ones, but as long as they do the job. And this is a dough cutter. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've scraped the cake slightly to finish it off. So if I were to transfer this cake, for instance, onto a cake board, I would leave this cake to chill completely, and then I'll stick a knife underneath the board between the surface board and the baseboard, lifting the cake up and then transferring it to my display surface, which is why my baseboard is important to me. But if I had no reason to transfer the cake, I would perhaps have kept the cake on the same surface without a baseboard. So for instance, if I used a, what do you call it, a cake plate or a cake stand, if this cake was to go on a cake stand, perhaps I wouldn't need the baseboard, which I can use, except my cake stand comes with a curved edge, so I can't decorate on it. And for convenience for this tutorial, I've decided to use the baseboard and the cake surface just so that I can demonstrate my preference and technique to you on this one. Over here, I have my stand mixer. And you wonder what a stand mixer has to do with decorating a cake. Well, remember our first cake, the 6-inch banana cake? We are going to be crumb coating that in ganache. So in my hands, I have some ganache that I have pre-made. We'll be talking about ganache, how to make it, in subsequent live sessions. So if you like this tutorial at the time of watching this on replay, leave a comment about what video you want to see in future, just so that I can gauge what interest you have, because I want these live sessions to be useful for you. With that said, I have ganache here that has been pre-made. For me, depending on what I am looking to achieve, I will whip my ganache. So today, for this tutorial, I need the ganache to be whipped for what I need it for. So there you go. For some reason, my mixer is a little bit, okay, hopefully I've got that right. And this goes in here, and I'm just going to whip this for about a minute on high. The reason why I am whipping the ganache is so that it is easy to spread, but there are also some downsides to it. If ganache is whipped, it reduces the shelf life. But essentially, this cake will be eaten within 24 to 48 hours. And for most part, it is going to be kept refrigerated. So it's not like it's not like it's a problem to whip the ganache. But that's a little bit of information. And depending on what you want to use the ganache for, whipping it might just break it up a little bit. Whilst it gives you a smooth, polished look and colors easily, there are also some disadvantages, but I preferably like to whip my ganache. In the past, for the crumb coat, I have preferred using leftover ganache that has a colored base that probably needs to be used so that I can finish the cake off in the actual color of the cake that it is being designed for. So that's done. I don't want to over whip this to break it up. Let me get some water. With that done, we've finished with whipping the ganache. And I'm going to take this out, put the mixer away, and then it will be time to perhaps crumb coat our first cake. So with the ganache done, I'll transfer it back into a bowl. In my edited tutorials, you'll find that mostly the part of making the ganache is skipped, and then I go from crumb coating, trimming, and then straight ahead ganache in the cake. So at least in the live demonstration, hopefully you have seen what happens in between chilling the cake and what happens thereafter. My work surface is clean, and I'm gonna go bring the cake back up. We'll see. Right, just for full disclosure, normally a cake like this I would leave to set a little longer, because when you press down on the buttercream, it is hardly set and it needs to be set for longer. But because I want you to see how this face is done, I've gone ahead to want to finish the cake, as in finish the crumb coat. So if I begin to observe there are problems with the cake, I will put it back in the fridge, and this session might probably not finish as I anticipated. Because I know the cake is not very steady in terms of the buttercream, I am just going to work slowly. So we are doing the crumb coat essentially, where a layer of ganache instead of buttercream is applied to seal the crumbs in. This also helps to firm up the cake and form a steady base for the cake over here. So because the cake is not steady all through, I am going to do this in different phases. I am going to do this in stages. So that's the bottom done. I'm going to scrape that, because ganache sets firm and dries quick, sets firm and hard. So leaving it longer on the cake is likely to set, and then it will create some problems for me. But with the cake not fully set, if I were to go ahead and cover it, moving it vigorously around, it is likely to fall into bits. I am anticipating some problems here, but you have to almost like work slowly with the cake here. And if you've seen a few cakes on this channel, I would normally trim my cakes but this I have chosen not to trim. Okay, so here is some of the problems we may have when the cake is not left to set. Because it's warm and the buttercream has not set in the fridge before applying the ganache, at room temperature or when the cake is brought out from inside the fridge, it pushes through the ganache that is being used to crumb coat it. At this stage, it's key that the cake goes back in the fridge. So I'm probably going to leave this cake to set completely. And also, I am concerned about the form of the cake. Because we were doing a demonstration, I have skipped some of the faces here. And that's simply because the cake is also for a family friend. So I can get away with a few different things. Had this not been for a family friend, I would have had to trim this entire cake, set the form up before covering. If I did that, this live session perhaps won't go ahead as anticipated, because there are going to be stages where there are gaps, because then I have to wait unless I have a filler cake, and I don't have that at this minute. So perhaps the intention to crumb coat this cake hasn't worked out today. But if you do see this on replay, know that I will finish this cake perhaps on the next stage. If not today, I'll do that tomorrow, so that I will finish decorating the cake completely and you will get to see the finished work. So if you're watching this on replay, watch it through, and then the next video after that will be this cake back and being finished altogether. Hope that makes sense. So you're going to essentially have a part 1 and part 2, because I don't have a filler cake, and attempting to fill this cake here will give us a disaster. I have a few cake disasters that are already tutorials on my channel. A cake that I filled, and at this stage I should have left to set and I didn't, and the cake fell over. I'll link it in the description box for you. So I am not trying to let you have a live session of a disaster happening. So hopefully you have some understanding of the cake decorating process. And just to recap what has happened here, we filled the cake, but the cake is not fully set. So attempting to cover the cake means that we have warm temperatures, the ganache is melting, and because the scraper pushes against the cake, moving it moves and shifts the cake, which might essentially cause the cake to move, or it might cause the cake to fall over. We need the cake to be firm so we can work with it, hence the decision to let it set completely. I'll let that cake set, and I'll bring the chocolate cake back, and we'll see if we can continue or at least get some end result on that. It's not as firm as I would like it, but as you can see, the weight of the top layer is weighing down the buttercream, causing the buttercream to bulge a bit. At this stage, if you have a cake like this, it will be very irresponsible to continue without having to check this. But this is a cake for my son, so I can find a way to do this rather easily, because this is going to be a cake displayed on a cake stand in the morning, and he'll be sung a happy birthday, and that will be it. We'll cut into the cake and that will be it. But if this cake were to be for a client, or a cake that was to go out, this part that is bulging, I would have to leave the cake to set. So the process of trying to fix this bulge here is rather simple. I will talk you through that, because my intention is not to fix the bulge. And that is simply because, like I said, this is my son's cake. But I'm glad we have these issues propping up, so I can explain and talk you through what you can do. Right, so we have that bulge here, and that is because the buttercream is very light. So any weight that towers on top of it pushes it out, and if you have air bubbles still in it, that will also cause the bulges. Now, if this is not fixed at this stage and you leave the cake to set in the fridge, it will set solid, obviously, because it's chilled. But because a cake is to be served at room temperature, When the cake, either when it's brought out or in transition or at final destination, when it comes to room temperature, because there will be air in the cake and they're cold, it's not holding it together, it will bulge out. So if this cake was covered in, say, fondant, it will cause bulges to happen in the cake. Now that's a different thing from air pockets. So for this, what I would have done easily is, at the time that the buttercream is filled into the cake, remember when I filled in the buttercream, I went ahead and covered it. I skipped a whole step, because normally what should happen is, after filling the cake is left to set. So I would wrap the cake without the buttercream covering it in the fridge, and I will put a small weight on it, and that is to press the cake down slightly, keep it steady, and to push out any air on it. So by the time that comes to a couple of hours on the cake, the bulge would have pushed the entire thing out, and then I'll clean that before covering the cake. So it means the cake would have set. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. So I'm going to cover it as I would, but just remember, I have talked you through a whole cake fix. I have a few decorating disasters on here where I fix some cake problems that probably should never have been there in the first place. But a sister likes the convenience, so oh, wow. So I am applying more buttercream on here, and there are air bubbles in this buttercream, as you can see. And one way to know if there are air bubbles in your buttercream is that you don't get a smooth finish when scraping the buttercream, and you see air pockets and air bubbles in the buttercream. But my son wants a rustic, simple cake, so it's probably the only time I'll get to make a rubbish cake. Even my cake disasters end up fixed well. So there you have it. Right. I might just have to leave this cake to set completely. I might just have to leave this cake to set completely before I do anything else. So perhaps this is the crumb coat phase of this particular cake. I should end the live here only because the time it will take to talk through all of this, wait for it to come back, means that there will be a stage of gaps, interact, which is why I am ending this live session. It's a pleasure to have you, and hopefully I should be back